Hey friends, it's the Reverend Tracy here, giving some context to us resharing this episode from the Friends Talking Nerdy archives. We're brokenhearted to share that our beloved friend of the show, Wendy, has passed away recently. In her memory, we're reposting our writers group episode we recorded together, a conversation that captures so much of what made her unforgettable, her wit, her warmth, and her fearless honesty. Wendy brought her full, brilliant self, as she always did, with sharp insights, real laughter, and a deep love for meaningful connection. I know it's personally one of my all-time favorite episodes to have recorded. So here's to my alternate universe sister-in-law, my Oxford comma friend. We miss you already. We celebrate you, and we're so grateful to have your voice echoing here one more time. For our friends, we hope you'll listen, remember, and celebrate her with us on this replay of episode 215 that we're posting on the same day as her celebration of life. Enjoy the show.
If your friends are nerdy and you are nerdy too, I want to talk to you. Friends Talking Nerdy.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim Jousma. Joining me live in the studio, it's the Reverend Tracy. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. We mentioned for a while that I was going to be in town with the haunt here. So of course I'm still in town. It's really kind of awesome to be able to come and do the recordings in person though, because I have kind of missed human interaction for the last year, like most humans on this earth. Mm-hmm. And it's been a little bit crazier than I thought. So not as vacation-y, but I'm glad that we're still able to meet up.
Yes.
When we can. Last week had a hiccup because of a last minute promo event, for example, because you can't plan around creatives, man. They will always.
No, you can't.
or lightning cables. Let's put it that way. That's a different story for a different day. But we are joined by a special guest here because we have a special reason for this episode. This is not a typical episode for us. This is our very first writers group. And joining us all the way from Texas is Wendy Nelson. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for asking. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. Doing good.
Doing as well as I can be for this season.
Well, before we get into things, as is tradition on the show, we have to ask the new person here, what is your nerd origin story? Let our audience know.
Oh, right. My nerd origin story started when I was just in the wee tender age of 4. We were in the airport. We were down here in Texas visiting relatives. We were living in North Dakota at the time. And as I'm walking through the airport, 4 years old, running berserk, can't control it whatsoever. And I right smack dab right into the legs of Peter Mayhew, who everybody should know is the man who initially played Chewbacca. Well, after, him saying it's okay, him and my dad and my parents having a conversation, and me being a huge, huge Star Wars fan from the time I was in diapers, that I had no idea who he was. But so after, they made their introductions and said their piece and walked away, my dad looks down at me. He goes, "Do you know who that was?" And I was like, "No, am I supposed to?" And he's like, "That was Chewbacca." And it was just nerd struck from that moment. And from that time on, and, I've seen him several times at Comic-Con. One time I even ran into him, literally smacked into him again as we were coming out of the bathroom here at the Dallas Comic-Con. And the following year, he recognized me. He's like, "Hey, you're Wendy the bathroom girl."
Did you get a chance to remind him of your meetup as a kid?
I did. Yeah. When we were outside the bathroom, I told him, I go, "We've met before." And he goes, "Really?" He goes, "I am usually really good with faces." And I go, "You probably wouldn't remember me." I go, "I was below your knees at the time." And he didn't remember that, but he thought it was funny.
It sounded like, I guess he probably heard it's like, "Oh, well, that sounds about right. That sounds like something I would do." And
yeah.
Well, as I mentioned, we are here to talk all things writing today. Myself, I'm actually starting it's a new project, but it's a new project based on an old project. I had a book that I wrote that I was proud of the idea, but, hindsight being 2020, the execution wasn't so well. So I decided to start it again, but I thought, why not start a writers group of some sort of people that are able to talk about their writing in kind of a friendly way, because maybe You both can understand how it can be sometimes with certain writers when because there's a lot of gatekeeping in the writing community. So in terms of people, like if they read something they don't like it, they want to make the other person feel better or whatever. But wanted to create a positive atmosphere for writing here. So let's just start off by asking, when did you start your love of writing? We'll go with Wendy.
My love of writing started from the time I was small. Before I could even read and write, I told stories verbally. I mean, from the time I was 2, my great uncle Axel, even, the last time I saw him, which was, a few years ago, he goes, I remember sitting on your lap. He goes, and you would just tell me the most fascinating stories. He goes, about a bunny you saw, or your stuffed dog. He goes, or a bird that you saw. He goes, or your grandmother's baking, something like that. It didn't matter what it was. I was telling stories before I could actually physically write stories. And I often tell people that being a writer isn't just something that I do, it's part of who I am, because it's that need to tell people and to share things with them through, the written word and then spoken word has always been a part of me. Mm-hmm. And so, like you, I like what you said, where, this is going to be a good space for writers, because I think that there's not enough spaces like that for writers, because I see so many that get dragged through the mud. Like, their work is fantastic. And then you get someone who has beef and, then that leads to, that person ultimately wanting to quit because it's ruined their self-esteem. And that's just, it's bull.
That is, especially in a writer's group situation. I mean, everybody that's bringing work in a writer's group is bringing something that's in rough draft status anyway. You're bringing for the critique to make it better. So just saying it's absolute crap and can't be better is ridiculous. So
right. I mean, that's the whole reason why it's called rough draft. I mean, you can't sit there and take a rough draft and expect it to be the polished piece. People don't realize, especially if they're not writers, that it takes 7, 8, 9, 10, however many revisions it takes to make it that polished piece. And, it's not just you, it takes multiple people to do that. So. Indeed.
What about you, Reverend?
I have a Reverend confession. I wouldn't say that I necessarily have a quote, say, love of writing. It's really more that I know I've got a story that I want to put out there. And I want to learn how to write to help do that, because that is the format in which these things go. My book style is going to be kind of a tell-all. People who listen to our show on the regular, it is no secret that, I'm pretty open about having PTSD, and a lot of it relating to like stuff that I went through childhood through young adult. And my nerdiness of talking about mental health and hygiene comes a lot from my experience from there, and wanting to be able to figure out and facilitate like healthy ways to have conversations about what happened, so that hopefully we can actually get a message out there so that we can have some awareness and stop this from happening to like future kids and stuff like that. So that's where my book's coming from. I'm a big proponent of, if you can tell your story and it not result in it being too triggering for you, that maybe you should. And so this is me very much trying to find a way to put my money where my mouth is. I guess I don't think I'm important enough for this to jump to any other format automatically. Like, I don't think like Lifetime's going to come and do a set about my life. Like, I think the book has to happen first.
No musical.
No musical. Yeah. But, yes. So and not that I'm not like narcissistically driven enough to really think like Lifetime wants to do a story on my book. But as far as if I'm going to put the story out there, I mean, I already talk openly with friends and people that I meet, and even bar conversations. So it's like, if I'm comfortable with it, why not put it in a format where it has the ability to possibly go out there and maybe make some small changes in our world in a way.
And, there's people out there that need to hear your story, because they may not have enough courage to speak their own truth. And who knows, that your words might give them the courage to say what they need to get off of their chest. And then, will in itself produce a chain where they'll help someone, they'll help someone, they'll help someone. So I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And then I liked what you'd said about like you appreciating that this was going to be kind of that safe building space, because it's kind of something that I got to experience in stand-up comedy, right? You have venues that you go to where people are very hyper competitive. They don't want to give you anything because they want to be the laugh of the night. And then you've got other open mics you go to where it was a little bit more communal, and you actually troubleshoot jokes together because we want everybody to be funny and do well.
Right.
So I love the collaborative experience. So that's where I'm kind of excited to do this group. I think this is going to give me the kick in the pants that I need to finally write this book. I've been talking about it for years. Yeah. And so that's where it's like, yeah, I'm going to struggle with calling it a love of writing, but I have felt like a responsibility to learn how to get these stories in writing, because like what Wendy said, you start off being a good storyteller. If I've already been telling these stories to connect with people who have been through stuff, maybe I can actually write.
No, maybe you can. I mean, it's just
you definitely can.
Putting pen to paper.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, at least typees.
Well, yeah. However, metaphor.
What year is it, Tim?
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Wendy. I've been writing ever since I was a kid. Like the first big writing event I remember, Calvin College back in Grand Rapids, the alma mater of the writer of Taxi Driver, Paul Schrader, which kind of explains a lot if you're from Grand Rapids, had a contest for our elementary school to where they wanted kids to write stories, and then they would be featured and all that, and some would win prizes. And this was before the sequel to Ghostbusters 2 came out. I wrote the sequel to Ghostbusters 2.
That's great.
Fifth grade. It was awesome. I didn't win though. My sister ended up being one of the people that went with a stupid story about these stupid cats, and I had this whole story planned out. But I'm kind of in the same boat as you, and it's like there are times to where I've not written, in terms of like letting procrastination or writer's block take effect. But there's no better feeling than putting pen to paper when you're in. It's true. Yeah, when you're in the middle of that writing groove and the words are just coming out of your fingers, that is a great feeling. And I thought, I think back to like one of my favorite kind of author mentors growing up was Robert Ludlum, of all people. Yeah. In his old paperbacks, I remember reading The Bourne Identity for the first time. He had this wonderful interview in the back where he talked about his writing style, and he says, "I don't like to think of myself as a writer. I'd like to think of myself as an entertainer." And I really, really dug that take, because he understood that it put his book next to like an Ernest Hemingway book, and he realized what he was giving the public. But I appreciated the fact that he was able to do that. Now, kind of tying into that, let's go into favorite authors. We'll start with you, Tracy. Who are some of your favorite authors? Even though you don't have a call to write, there must be some books that you've read that you thought, this is great. And also in thinking of your book, maybe there's some authors that you've read that you think maybe I'll take this style.
Let's see. I used to really like Ernest Cline, but womp womp. That was a really good book, though. And that was one of the things that I remember inspiring like some cosplay. And there was that whole little My Nerd origin story going way back into the archives. Part of that was that I had written him and told him that I wanted his favorite fan art, if he had time for this character, Artemis. Now that there's a movie about it, more people know who I'm talking about. And he had actually responded like really quick. And I always thought that was neat. So I liked his writing too. That's what even led me to want to reach out to him. I know that I've already talked recently about books, for people who listen to the show on the regular, I don't remember the author names, but the first books that really like got my attention were The Raging Quiet and Speak. I think his name was Christopher Moore. Yeah, because it's Michael Moore that's the documentary guy. So it's Christopher Moore is good. And then there's also Michael Malone. And I discovered those two like close to each other. And what I loved about what was the first one? See, they're so freaking close that I almost talk about
Christopher Moore.
I think it's Christopher Moore. And I will totally like post a link to one of these books, be like, sorry if I got the name wrong. But he did this book called Lamb. And I thought it was funny to listen to a satirical interpretation of the years of Jesus's life, like that are missing from the Bible. And that was really fun to read. And then he did a lot that was like satire, just kind of making fun of themes in our culture of like, he did vampires and all sorts of stuff. He even did one of kind of the idea that someone, like a human being, can be given like the curse of being like a death type character, like a Grim Reaper, like even on that one. So I loved like, oh, okay, you took a topic and satired it and made an entire line of books. I'm like, that's pretty clever. And then what was it? Christopher Malone. Christopher Moore. Yeah. There we go. Because Christopher Moore. And then he did just the first like really big book that I've ever read. And then what got unfortunate was I was trying to read like through more of his stuff, and I noticed he kind of just started repeating pattern on some of his newer books. Like Four Corners of the Sky felt so close to the other the bigger book. I'm so like spacing on it right now, so I feel bad that I'm spacing on the names of these things. But it was just kind of following the same themes, so I wound up backing off of that one. So I guess I did have a few authors that I could kind of rattle out there. Sorry, I'm shit with names. It's just a trend of my life, folks. I don't mean to be.
Yeah. Well, but you knew the books. That was
yeah. You can find Four Corners of the Sky, and Lamb is a really popular one from Christopher.
What about you, Wendy?
All right. Well, my favorite authors are Anne Rice and the author Diana Gabaldon. I like Anne Rice primarily because she's very open with how her writing is. She's very honest and she's so creative. I mean, it's just amazing how she can, create these. She's great on characterization and world building. And for me, those are the two things that are essential when I want to read. And I met her through a writer's group. What was it? It was 2000. This is 2021. So it was last year in February. So a little bit over a year ago, that I didn't know who she was. And because she wasn't underneath her actual author's name, she was underneath a pseudonym. And she told me, she goes, write the book that you want to read. And I was like, okay. And then, come to find out, I sat down, I was like, at first I was like, who is this person? What are they trying to tell me this? That's how I write. And, she gave me some other advice too. And I'll be honest, at the time, I was like, I'm not going to take this advice. This person probably doesn't know what they're talking about. I stand corrected. They know what they're talking about. And the reason why I like Diana Gabaldon is because she's able to blend genres together. Like, this is something that, Trad Pub has said for, dozens upon dozens upon dozens of years, that you cannot blend genres. It doesn't work. She proved them wrong. I mean, because she's romance, she's historical fiction, she's science fiction and everything. And being a huge Doctor Who fan, coming to find out that her main character, Jamie Fraser, is based upon the Highlander in one of the episodes of Doctor Who, I was hooked. I mean, that I found out after the fact, but I mean, that's one of the reasons what kept me going. It's just because she takes things that she loves and, she blends them together. And like Anne Rice, that she's able to build realistic worlds and, step back into the past. And it's like dropping you like a pinpoint into the middle of all that.
Yeah.
And one more thing, I love how she's able to write with emotions in her sensories. Like, in one of her books, she described the color of light, where it was like a light blue and crystalline and see-through. And I mean, immediately I could picture that. And I was like, just took my breath away.
Yeah, Anne Rice, I'm not going to say she's my favorite author, but in terms of writer, she's one of my favorite people, because I've actually sent her an email and she's personally sent one back. I mean, you can tell when a celebrity has like a form email, she didn't do that. She was directly referencing things. Also on her Facebook page. I don't know recently, because it looks like recently she has a lot more handlers controlling her page. But in the past, she was, very much on her Facebook page answering questions. So even if it's like I said, she's one of my favorite people. I'm not Interview with the Vampire is a classic. I'm not a huge fan of her other works, but if she has something to say, I'm going to listen to it because she's so nice.
It's, for me, it's not even her vampire series. It's the Witching Hour series. That is what, I mean, because it's so in depth. And I mean, how she can just keep all that straight, that to me is just mind boggling.
Well, and think about
the character's great.
Think about all the twists and turns she's done. She's had the vampire stories. She's had her BDSM erotic stories.
But didn't she also do some like angels?
Yes, she's done the religious.
She did. And I mean, she's focused on the castrati of, ancient Venice. And, like you said, she touched upon the life of Mary Magdalene and Jesus. I mean, so there's not a topic that she's afraid to address. And, that's her fearlessness. That's the word I was looking for. Her fearlessness is one of the things that I really admire, because if she wants to write about it, she's not going to let somebody stop her from doing it.
And most importantly, like for many, many years, she proclaimed that she was an atheist and then, became a Christian again.
Yeah.
She was as a kid.
Yeah.
But I had written her shortly after she had become a Christian, and she still didn't discourage me from reading her other works.
Right.
She still very much embraced the fact that, dark stories of murder, mayhem, and all kinds of other stuff can have light in them.
Yes.
In a weird way.
Yeah. It's funny because I've never read her angel stuff. I did read some of the, I kind of skimmed through it, which means half the books I started to read and then I just didn't finish because of ADD and, shit like that. My struggle was real. But it did make me realize I missed a big one. Terry Pratchett.
Oh man.
Worlds and hitting everything. Just look at the World series. It is so expansive. And the reason I think I didn't think of him at first is I more picked up on him after he was already sick and working with other authors. So it's they're his ideas, but they're not really his books anymore. But the Discworld was all pretty much him.
Yeah.
And good luck reading it all. My God, he must have done nothing but sat and write for years to get that done. And then when he was getting sick, that's when he reached out to other authors.
He's like Danielle Steele. He's extremely prolific, and Jackie Collins. They're all of them are prolific writers. They've all said before that they didn't need a lot of sleep. They just wrote.
And it's such a good story. And there's so many characters that makes you give a shit about, but he's also witty and funny. Oh my God, I love Death. Death and, what's the name of the sad sack wizard guy?
It's not coming to me.
Rincewind. Yep, there we go. Rincewind and Death. Oh, it's such a funny relationship. And
I know.
Thing with the witches and wizards, you just get so pulled into the world, and then you realize you haven't even touched all of the corners of the Discworld because it's so many books and sets of books, and there's websites dedicated to just suggested orders of reading. Endless entertainment in that sense.
It's the last time that I got together with a group of friends of mine. I mean, I'll be honest, I was kind of sick, so I was just more of an observer at that time. But everybody was talking about Terry Pratchett, and that was one of the big things that turned into actually a kind of a big row. Is, the people disagreeing on, which order to read his books. Some people were saying, read it this way. Some people were reading it that way. And I was like, just read it. It's stop arguing about it. Just read it. Because he's, as far as I'm concerned, he's top tier when it comes to writers. That, Stephen King said that, he sees himself as an amateur writer. And, Terry Pratchett, as he was a pretty humble guy. But, if anybody's going to say, that they were, the top tier, top of their craft writer, it's him. Hands down.
I don't think I've ever read any of his stuff, but admittedly I've been open about not being a big fantasy fan. So
I mean, that one you may find entertaining just because of the wit. The humor. I still love, if you want an idea of it, I did think the little 2-parter series they did on The Color of Magic, I know it was on Netflix for a while. That was pretty good. I think they did a great job. That's exactly how I pictured Rincewind to be. Wendy, I don't know if you got a chance to see that, but
I haven't, but I'm going to check it out.
And it just has basically felt letters of wizard and varying sizes. I'm yes, that is Rincewind. That is exactly how I pictured him.
I love that.
It's one of those things that I thought actually did a good job, but they did it as a 2-parter movie series type thing, mini series, I guess. And then they also did one on the Hogfather, which I don't remember reading that one, but I did read Wizards, which is kind of Wizards and The Color of Magic, I think was what they were trying to go for in that story.
The Hogfather, I just imagine the mafia in Alabama. Anyway, some of my other favorite writers, growing up, I was a huge fan of L. Frank Baum, because around the time Return to Oz hit theaters, it was released in the summer, and my grandmother just happened to have the entire run of L. Frank Baum Oz books, so I spent an entire summer reading all those. So that was good. Mark Twain, of course. And then the older I got, like I mentioned multiple times, I love more the action adventure thriller type of stuff. So Reading the works of Ian Fleming, the original James Bond.
Brilliant.
Great books. Robert Ludlum's books, the ones he actually wrote, not the ones that have come out after his death or anything like that. Tom Clancy, of course, same scenario, because I'm seeing a lot of these authors are kind of like doing a James Patterson deal, or like Terry Pratchett, in terms of writing. It seems like they're writing out the faintest of outlines and then just giving it to other people, but still having their name on it so they get the writing credit.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, because it was their story idea. So they get like the story and concept credit. Because I think that's how it worked out with Terry Pratchett when he made those deals, because it goes back to, again, as soon as he found out he was sick, he knew he had all of these stories and characters he wanted to bring to life. Mm-hmm. And then he started reaching out and trying to find authors that like kind of, wrote in a style that matched those themes.
But that's slightly different than James. James Patterson is just more, at this point, I think you would agree, Wendy, he's more just like an assembly line.
Yeah, he's basically just selling his name. Yeah. I don't mean that in a crass sense. It's in a literal sense. He's slapping his name on it. And me being the person is, I'm hoping he's doing it to help, give other authors a boost, and not just making money for himself. But
I would have a little more respect for him if he did like the Steven Spielberg thing, because back in the 80s, especially, when Steven Spielberg produced Back to the Future, you saw his name, but it was still a Robert Zemeckis film through and through.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that you use that, because I've used that before, when comparing, especially, like with Clive Cussler. My dad is a huge fan of Clive Cussler. I've read a few things of his. He's not my favorite. He's a good writer, but his, since his death, he's what?
He's very themed, right? Doesn't he always do like with ships or boats?
Yes.
Or the ocean?
Very themed in archaeology but his son took over his writing. But, a lot of people are like, oh, this is the same. It's, their expectations have been met each time. And I think unlike James Patterson, that Clive Cussler, he put it in capable hands that he knew that the integrity wouldn't drop. That's my thing, is having read James Patterson before, like stuff he wrote is great. Mm-hmm. And then, like the later stuff, it's hit or miss. And some of it's great, some of it's not. I'm not going to dog somebody's work, because, we're all writers. We deserve to be supported. But it wasn't the same. My expectations were not met, is what I was trying to say. Yeah,
and it's a bit more of a lazier product at the end of the day. It's for James Patterson, for the person, because more than likely the people that he's commissioning to write these stories are very low on the totem pole, very new industry, so they're lucky for the byline. So I have nothing against them.
I'm the same.
Yeah.
I'm stoked that they get the opportunity, but it kind of irks me a little bit that the laziness behind it. Because if you're a writer, you're a writer. You don't ever stop. That's a quote direct from Louis L'Amour, who is from my home state of North Dakota. I did not ever get the chance to meet him, but I have several family members that knew him personally. Right. And, that's what he said. He goes, if you're a writer, you're a writer. That never stops. And
agreed there.
Sorry.
No, keep doing it.
Yeah.
Keep doing that. Next question.
I can go off on a tangent, so that's why I have to make sure I stop myself.
No, we're a show built on tangents.
Tangents and ADD.
What was the first piece that you remember writing that you felt, I'm a writer?
I'm a writer. It would probably be the very first book I ever published. I write underneath two pen names. One is underneath the name of Wendy Nelson Sinclair, which is a historical fiction writer. And the other one is Becca Baldwin, which is romantic comedy. And when I was writing my very first published piece, which is called The Unfortunate, check it out, people. And that when I hit the last button, the last letter of the end, that's when I felt it. That's when I was like, I always felt like I'm a writer, but I'm not just a writer now. I'm also an author, because I know that this is something, and this is a piece of me on the page. Whereas, I hadn't felt like that before. I'd written stories, I'd won contests, I've been published as a poet before. And, all those times it never really never really gripped my heart or felt like it was a piece of my soul. Mm-hmm. But as soon as I hit that last button, and that's when I knew, I'm not a kind of person that just sits there and breaks out into tears for no reason. But as soon as I hit that last button or that key on my keypad or keyboard, I burst into tears because I had this sense of fulfillment, which I cannot describe. As a writer, you can put anything to words. I cannot put that feeling into words. It's only something that can be felt. It's not something that can be expressed verbally. And so,
agreed. Yeah. Now, I'm sure you probably do not have an experience, or do you?
Oh my God. I was so glad that you guessed that I didn't, because I kind of do. So I did my kind of high school goth phase of writing poetry. And there was one that I remembered. So for a hot second there, in the hip years of the early aughts, colored mascara had kind of become a thing. And, I dealt with anxiety and depression that was largely untreated in my high school experience. So there was something that happened, with a boy, and I wound up basically just ugly girl crying in the bathroom and looked in the mirror and there's blue mascara all down my face. So I wrote a poem about that, and it was the cheeks were then stained with the blue mascara that I wore that day. And that's the only part of that poem I remember.
That's a gripping visual.
Yeah. And it was just the way that visual stuck with me. And then I was able to turn that into something that even stuck with how I phrased it, in words, to make it somewhat artistic. And it was really the first time I remember writing as a process of, processing something. Instead of just really succumbing to emotions or, I used to get in fights and stuff whenever things were really high intensity for me. Cause anybody who is trauma informed or anybody who is aware of what kids do, how they act out when they're in trouble situations, it's well, no shit, I got into fist fights sometimes. So it was just kind of nice to begin at that point to understand that there were other ways to process pain and other ways to process suffering that you're just going to endure. Because this was just a boy. That's what's hilarious. I had been through way worse shit than that. As you guys will find out as we start talking about this book. But so yeah, it was just mind blowing that not only did I feel like I could write something that could elicit visualization in other people, it was also just mind blowing to be able to process something in a different way. What about you, Tim?
Me, yes. I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Wendy. I like I mentioned, I've written since I was a kid, but when I completed my first draft of my first book and, ended up writing the end, I wrote that all longhand. This is well before computers became cost effective for me. So, writing that whole thing out longhand, it was just I finally did it. I've written a book. I'm real. And there are a couple of other things as well. When I was hired by Latino Review Media to write for their website, that's how I ended up getting a press pass to interview Stan Lee. And they sent me some business cards that they had printed up with, Tim Jelsma, writer, on there. So that was cool as well.
That is cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to go to Vistaprint. I'll just get it that way.
Yeah.
You can put whatever you want on there. It's great.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what they did. But, still having it on there was definitely nice. Now,
it's nice when somebody else bestows you with the title, right? Yes. When somebody says this, I recognize you as a writer and I'm going to give you these things. So don't mind my smartassery. It's just how I roll.
I'll tell you another point when it really struck me is when I sold my first book, my first organic sale, that it was 2 days after I published it, because of course, friends and family are going to order, to support you. But this one came up out of nowhere. And I was like, what? No, somebody bought my book. Oh my, it was literally the mind blown emoji. And I was like, I can't believe it, because the lady that bought it, she told me that, a friend of a friend of a friend who bowled with my mom had bought the book, and she saw it on the table. And when they were over visiting, she goes, and I read the blurb on the back, and she goes, I had to buy it. And that was another moment where I was just like, I can't believe it. It's legitimacy. The imposter syndrome is over.
Oh man, I was gonna say, like, isn't it totally an imposter syndrome response to like, did you have the urge to reach out and be like, I'm sorry, did you mean to get this book? Like, I'll give you a refund if you meant to get something else.
I did. I mean, because I was sitting there and I was contemplating emailing her back, and I was like, are you sure you bought the right book?
Were you sure you're looking for Nelson DeMille, maybe?
It's like, maybe you're choosing somebody else, but no. And, after she read it, she wrote me, she goes, this was really good. She goes, this is a story that was similar to like her grandmother's story, like her not grandmother, but like great-great-grandmother, over like literally having to raise herself in, like Jack the Ripper era England. And, just learning how to survive and doing everything it took, to make sure that she saw the next day. It's like, it didn't matter about filling her belly. It didn't matter finding a safe place to sleep that night. It was just about survival. And those words right there, I mean, they were gripping. I was like, I reached somebody. So, I mean, that's, again, you can't really put to words how that feels.
Yes. Well, you're looking at me.
What? Oh gosh, I was just looking at people. Was I giving you like a look?
It was weird. I don't know. Okay, now the projects that we submitted here this week. You have a project called In Bloom.
I do.
Yes. Now, as we all discussed before we did the recording here, we are trying to create this writing group so, we can have some support amongst ourselves. So we're not necessarily going to always be reading our work to the public if we don't want to. But, again, a way to kind of, build rapport amongst ourselves so we can, have the confidence to be able to give the critiques and all that. But tell us about In Bloom.
Okay. Well, In Bloom, the concept of it came from literally a dream. It's a dream where, I sit there and I was like a bystander watching this young lady get out of a cab, and, she just had like worst day ever. And In Bloom, we have our character whose name is Azalea Bloom. She's had the worst week ever. Her boss tried to sexually harass her. And so, I mean, she threw hot coffee on his lap and she's out the door. And then come to find out, she goes home seeking solace, only to find her boyfriend in flagrante with somebody else. And so she leaves and she rushes home. Oh, I forgot to say the other thing. The worst part of it is her fiance or boyfriend at the time refuses to give her back her cat. He's literally holding her cat for ransom. And so Tracy would understand. Our kitties are our babies. You don't mess with our babies.
All the cat mamas and daddies out there, because there's some cat daddies too. Kitty baby, man.
And just basically to summarize it, because again, I can go off onto a tangent. It's basically the story of Azalea, picking up from the bottom, and along the way reconnecting with someone who's really special in her life, someone that she never thought that she would connect with or have a chance with. And it's basically the story of two people coming together and rebuilding their lives and, finally going for what they actually want rather than just, accepting what other people say they should have. I don't want to give too much away because, I want people to read the story and I want them to be surprised. So.
And you want to make money. No.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. How long has the idea been percolating?
Percolating for probably about 6 months. That it came to me while I was writing my series, A Girl Gone Crazy. And I was in the middle of writing book 4 when, I woke up the next morning and, it's 5:30 in the morning. And I was like, hey, I got to get this down. So, of course, you wake up and, you write stuff down on paper that you think is brilliant. And then when you wake up in the morning, you're like, what is this? And I'll be honest, that's how it was. But I was like, hey, you know what? There's good bones here, though. Let's work on this. Let's bring this together. And so that actually inspired a series of so far 4 novels that I have planned that, are going to be part of another standalone series.
Now, the novels you have planned, tell folks kind of your outlining process on that.
Okay.
Do you use outlines? Are you a pantser? Are you a plotter? Which way do you go?
I am a plantser, which is I both plot and pants at the same time. That a lot of my outlines are in my head just because I've got a photographic memory. So I remember stuff. But, if I have a tendency, if I put it down on paper, it's going to change. I'm not going to stick to the outline. So what I do is like when scenes come to me, I'll write that down and I'll keep a log of those. And then I kind of write in the way that Diana Gabaldon writes, that she doesn't write in a linear or chronological form. She writes scene by scene by scene and then pieces it all together. And so that's how I do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so this here, I have, the titles already written, and I have kind of like a rough sketch of the characters and, what, just basically a bullet point of what, I want to have happen in the novel. And so, my outlines are not like these super detailed, like what you'd see Ken Follett, where he'll fill a whole complete yellow tablet filled with ideas. And I mean, he's a brilliant writer. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
He's a brilliant writer, one of my favorites, but I'm just not that way. I still plan, but I'm more pantser than I am a planner. Gotcha.
Now your project.
So my project, I know I kind of touched on it a little bit. So my project is that whole tell-all. I already have a working name for it. I don't mind sharing it because it's kind of been like documented on at least I've got dates showing like, yep, this is the planned title of my book. But the idea was to call it The Hands of Many. And
I think it's a great title.
Thank you, because it's really representative of what it is. I am not officially diagnosed technically with CPTSD, but I do finally have a diagnosis for PTSD. There's just like a lot of stuff going on in mental health right now as far as what gets considered to be diagnostics and like how it gets put into the DSM. So there's still like some conversation out there about the C in front of it. And that just stands for complex. Yeah. And just to throw it out there, and where this is going to help connect with the fuck this has to do with my book, is complex PTSD is typically caused by trauma, like sustained to like going back into childhood. And there's normally repeat issues. Therefore, the hands of many, because unfortunately, no, my story isn't that, I sustained this one abuse and then this how it affected my life. Like the whole point is that, I sustained this one abuse and then it seemed to kind of do that domino effect. And I feel that these statistics like really kind of lined up to things that I experienced. They talk about, if you're abused as a child, you're more likely to like sustain things like rape and domestic violence and things going on later in your life. And so as I started learning statistics and like these kind of charts where you see these sort of demographics playing out, it got me more interested in understanding why I am the way I am. And so these are the stories that basically caused all of the cortisol to dump into my brain as a kid, resulting in CPTSD. And I think I went into it decently earlier of just, I feel like it's a little bit my obligation to share my story. And I have in passing and in support groups. But I think this style of getting your message out there and getting your story out there, like it works really well for a book. And that's where a lot of things kind of start in that sense. And it's even low pressure because it's not necessarily jumping to trying to put me on some sort of like big platform. It gives me the privacy to sit and write these things out. And then I can float it and see if anybody like wants to publish it. But that's a lot of what I'm going to learn. And I think it's funny, by the way, like comparing some of my answers to some of these questions where it's like, you two are writers. Meanwhile, I am just trying to write something. So I think it's really interesting to get some of this, the different responses as far as like how we think about our books and things like that. So,
but again, that's ultimately the goal of what we're trying to do here. So that's somebody that is new to the process, because you may not be a writer now, but through the process, you may discover you love it.
Yeah.
There are countless stories of people that, put pen to paper for the first time in their 70s and were able to sell a novel.
Exactly. And I even have like fictional story ideas. Like Wendy said, like her current one came from a dream. I remembered having this really intense, like it has to do with space and zombies. It was a really weird dream. And I still remember it. And I'm like, that mixes space and zombies. I wonder if I can make that into a book, or if that's just something that like I would self-publish.
You can definitely make that into a book.
Zombies are still hot, man. Like I don't.
There are people out there that will read that stuff, and I'm one of them. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, you already told me that you'd read my other book anyway. See, that was what was kind of cool about getting Wendy involved in this, was me starting to realize, because God, how long ago was that, Wendy, that I asked?
A couple of years.
Yeah, like this is how long this has just been on the burner for me. So I'm glad to do this and kind of help me hopefully have some stick-to-itiveness with it. But I had reached out to Wendy. I was like, hey, like, I don't want to impose because I know you do this. Like, right, Wendy, is this like your main source of income? Or
it's half and half. Like right now, I make enough to pay, a good chunk of the bills, but, I still have to have an alternative job.
Yeah.
Now.
And that's what I meant was like, you use that, like that is a source of income for you. So I try not to impose on my friends.
Yeah. Oh, I'm very open about that.
I just remember having that like whole conversation with you about that.
Yeah. Because I remember you were really timid about it. And I was like, hey, I'll help you however I want to. It's like, I'm here to support you, man. It's like, you need me to draw you a map? I'll draw you a map. I mean, it'll be detailed. It's like you turn right at the Circle K, you go up, you turn left at, the school, whatever. If you need a hand, I'm there. I just want to take a second to say that I think the fact that you're writing your book is also beneficial for people like me, because when we read that, we can get, even though we don't understand, the mindset of, say, like a character that's gone through those, we can get a glimpse of what it's like through people who actually have experienced that. And it's really important, especially if you want to create characters that have impact, characters that, people want to relate to. I think that's necessary for, not only for you to share your voice, but for, others to read it. So that way they can understand and see where you're coming from.
And other things that this is worth mentioning, because I didn't say it earlier, other stuff that I did want to cover in the book are for people who haven't experienced these things.
Yeah.
Like what to say, what maybe to not say. Like I want to talk about the fact that, hey, there were kids that were in my life that are now, they're my age, but they were also children when this was going on. And when I open up to them about this happening, they like take some personal responsibility. Yeah. This idea is like, first of all, if you were a child and your friend that is your age, like if you were a child when all that happened, like, please don't blame yourself. Like, oh my God, we were all children. Nobody should have had to navigate that.
Right.
And also stuff that's like what maybe not to say. Like, for example, if you were an adult when this child was going through what they were going through and they tell you like, later on, like, hey, by the way, when I was a kid and you were an adult when I was a kid, this happened. Like maybe don't say I knew something was going on. Like that to me, I think was probably the worst response I've ever had. Cause it's hard not to process. Like you knew, but you didn't do anything. So these things.
That's horrifying to me.
Right. Like, and I don't think, cause that goes into that knee jerk reaction, right? Like somebody told you something heavy. And I don't think they actually knew, if that makes sense. Like,
it does.
You can maybe understand that maybe something wasn't right. And there's like a whole stigma for false red flagging CPS, by the way. So I even understand that. But, I want to try to cover it in a way that's a little bit more comfortable and to give people kind of ideas of how to respond when somebody feels comfortable enough to share their story with you. And a lot of it is, one of my besties said, I give her nonverbal hugs. And what that is basically I've learned. So when I just sit and listen and don't try to interject. So there's something to that, because sometimes people are just talking to you so that they can still further process. Right. And they're really wanting you to understand the type of human they are. Like I don't know anybody who's a trauma survivor that just tells a story just for attention. Like normally because you're trying to relate, but that's really why humans tell stories anyway. And that goes.
That's right.
Cave drawings. Like it was either trying to give instructions for future people to live, or it was trying to relate. And that's what kills me. Just as a silly side tangent, is one of the like normalized memes that I saw floating around was normalize not responding to somebody's story by telling a similar situation you went through. I'm like, wait a second, but that's how humans bond. We
right.
Bond through storytelling. So that's where I'm excited about this stuff.
I saw that same meme and I was just like, it was just a scroll. It's like, you're not even worth my time. It's like, because people like that, they just don't get it.
It's like, okay, so you're just saying, I want to talk about me and stop talking. Like that was so hard not to take it that way. I'm like, but wait, humans relate by stories.
Exactly.
Speaking of stories.
What about your project then?
Yeah. I feel like Millhouse, what was that episode where like somebody had like an awesome like show and tell guest and then Millhouse comes up like, this is my puppy or something.
Yeah. I think I know what episode, because I'm a huge Simpsons fan, and I sort of remember that. I don't remember who, but I can understand. That was a great moment. Nice comparison.
All right. Well, the project I'm currently working on right now is called Time to Play the Game. It is. I'm reworking my first novel. My first novel. Love it, but I love the idea. The execution was very much a first novel. This past summer I was in school. I took a screenwriting class, and the teacher talked about how in television they do essentially what are called beat sheets in the writer's room, to where they will just kind of throw out ideas and work out every single beat of the episode. And once the beat sheet is finished, that beat sheet is given to the writer of the episode, and then they create the first draft from that. So, I included it in the folder. I have the book beat sheeted out. So it's 73 pages, 22,000 words. So everything that is going to happen in the book is in that outline. And what I have found for me by doing that is that it has made the writing process a lot faster.
Yes.
And just being able to have that outline, treating it like an architect with a blueprint, has very much been a big help. But to what you mentioned earlier, I've also found, a couple of instances to where I've already changed some stuff. And that's the beauty of having that outline, because like, for instance, there was a character at the beginning who in the outline, I don't really name. I just say that he's a man. But once I started writing the outline, then I realized who that person was and was able to add a little more. And then now that I know who this person is, it will kind of change some things a little bit further down the line, but it will change them for the better. So this is the first time I've actually gone with the complete plotting aspect first. I used to be a pantser. That's how I did it before. But I think a lot of, for me at least, the pants, going by the pants was... When it worked, it was great, because that feeling again of when you're typing everything out and you're in the groove, that's great. But when you're not in the groove and you're just stuck, that can be the worst feeling.
It's worse. Oh, it's horrible. I mean, it doesn't happen to me a lot, but when it does, I'm just like, oh no, why am I here? And it's for me, it's pretty easy to get back to that, because if I just get up, walk away, and stay away for a little bit and come back, it's like, okay, we're good, back on a roll. But I like the fact how you say that you used to be a pantser, but now that you're more of a plotter and a planner, because a lady that used to teach me that I took several creative writing classes from, and who was kind of a mentor, was a pretty established Harlequin romance writer. That she told me, she goes, not everybody can fit into a certain formula when it comes to planning their novel. Some people need to keep it, inside. Some people need to put it on paper. You just got to find what works for you. And I really, really respect and like the fact that, you had that flexibility and, your adaptability, and wanting to change. I looked at your outline and I thought it was really well plotted out. And, it was solid. I mean, you could find out, what to expect, and you knew your story. And a lot of writers don't. That they approach it. They're like, oh, what am I supposed to do? How's this going to go? But not you. You had a direct plan, and reading the little snippet that you put on there too. I have to say this: that your dialogue, even though it's a rough draft, it reads so easily. I mean, it's just like everyday speech, and that is so hard for even established writers to get right off the bat. I mean, I was really impressed at just how easily the dialogue flowed, and how the characters were able to speak amongst one another. And I mean, that just blew me away, because I mean, sometimes I have difficulty with, the dialogue between characters, because, sometimes my quirky brain is like, hey, this is how we're going to sound it, or we're going to say it. And then I go back and I read it. It's like, what the hell was I thinking? It's like, this sounds like I had a stroke, but, and then I have to go back and reread it. But your dialogue is, I mean, it's strong. Your narrative is strong too. And I wrote a couple of notes down just to read that, if the topic came up. And so, and that's something that I really admire. And I think the fact that you should really, keep pushing on this, because you have a story that people are going to want to read.
Nice.
And it's good.
See, yeah, I get that in a sense, because really it would be like me relating it to my experience, right? Because my experience is more doing character work and improv.
Yes.
But it would be like improving two characters back and forth.
Yes.
And making sure the conversation sounds like it's between two characters and not the same character.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd ever thought about that in that way before. That it's kind of hard to replicate a conversation between two different people when it's coming from the brain.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like character work, but
well, the best thing I've found for that is when I write down any conversation that I have, I immediately speak it out loud. Because, when you are reading a piece out loud, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be catching all the little mistakes that you're not catching when you're reading it. Because when you're reading your own work, you know what you intended. But when you're speaking it, then what's really there is gonna fly off the page. And I think for dialogue, especially, if it does not flow out of your mouth, because I think of Carrie Fisher. Carrie Fisher has this great line in Star Wars Episode 4 where she says, Governor Tarkin, I should have recognized your foul stench when I was brought on board. And she's for years laughed at that line because she says, who talks like that?
Right.
That's just George Lucas being fancy. No human talks like that.
That's right.
Yeah. Last question here, since we're about an hour in. Your writing process. Do you write longhand? Do you write on computer? Do you stick with Microsoft Word? Do you have another program do you use? Do you have just multiple papers everywhere? What is your process?
Okay, so when it comes to notes, I write that all out longhand because usually I'm not at home and I'm not in front of a tablet or my phone or, something like that. So notes, it's longhand. When I actually do the writing process, I used to be a Microsoft Word, but for me, it would crash all the time. So like technical difficulties, I was like, you know what? I just gave it the finger and I was like, I'm done with it. And so I switched to Google Docs, and Google Docs is where I do the majority of my writing. And then, once it's done, then I upload it into an actual Microsoft Word file and then, pass it on. But the actual part of my writing is in Google Docs. And I like the fact that, it catches stuff that I don't as I'm writing. And I like the usability of it. For me, it's easy to use because I'm not the most technically gifted person. I'll admit it. That's why I have my brother, who's very good friends with Tracy. And so for me, it just makes if I can make the process as simple as possible, then it's going to work best for me. Sorry, if you guys hear dogs barking, that's my dogs. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. We're real life humans. We don't do a lot of editing when we fuck things up or something.
Good.
It's like, yeah, we're people. It's cool. It makes us relatable.
We're the Ramones of podcast. Yeah.
That's right. It's like my dog doesn't like the FedEx, and you all get to hear it now. So that's good.
What about you?
So we go back into, I'm probably going to try to sit down when I have time to breathe outside of haunt season and look at the outlines you guys have. I do have a rough outline. The only reason I didn't share it yet is because it's got real names in it. And I haven't fully decided if I'm going to be that bold about that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure if people know it's me, they're going to put together some of the people I'm talking about. But my point isn't to try to shame anybody or get them in trouble or make them feel gross. Honestly, my hope for everybody is if you're a fucked up human who's like hurt other people, I hope you've gotten therapy and healed, because healthy people treat people.
That's right.
Some people do. Because again, the point is to open up the conversation and realize that this is happening. It happened as soon enough. Like, I'm not that old. I'm only in my 30s. Like, this isn't that long ago. And there's still stories like this going on, and we have a system that seems to perpetuate it. But so I'm learning, basically. I want to sit down and look at your guys' stuff. I do have that outline up, and I might just make a private document for just myself that has real names so that I can share something. And then what was really funny is, we sit there and we talk about, are you a plotter or a pantser? And I'm like, well, I'm more of a plotter for sure. Like, I mean, Tim, that his surprised face is probably none. Like, oh, you would plan everything before you even bothered to write it. And so what's funny though, is I tried to do that. And then I wrote like my first little chapter, like a first draft of a chapter. And I decided, like, for some reason, I don't know if I want that story in there. So it's kind of funny, and don't get disheartened. Like anybody out there also starting to write, like you might find that, especially if it's a tell-all book and you've got themes in your life, like you might go to write a story and be like, man, I don't know what it is, but this story just doesn't feel right for this book. And I'm sure that even happens with characters or chapters in fiction as well, right? Like that you decide, well, that character, I don't think I want them in this at all anymore.
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
Yeah.
And
meanwhile, you already have a character sheet and you've probably written out everything about them, you know, but I know some people that organize it that way.
With fiction, and I'm sure it would be the same thing with nonfiction as well. Don't like throw it away just because you may find that it's not good for your work now. Maybe a future draft, it could, be inserted, or if you write a sequel,
a different project even. Because I know that there's a project that the story, it's basically, about the wrecking of the relationship with my father.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I realized that does have something to do with my whole life story. But I almost feel like that would be better to put almost in another project that is possibly still going on, where we're wanting to collect stories of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Or basically it'd be like a catch-all, a bunch of people submitting their stories and it being a collection. So that's where it's well, I'm glad I wrote it because I'm aware of a project where I might give them that. And then, so basically just all of that was to say, don't get too disheartened, but I don't handwrite anything. I've had carpal tunnel issues since I was a kid. So I've really done well to keep it away. Given that I had some signs of it, in 5th grade, writing paper. Oh yeah, I know. Cause a lot of people's that's early. How are you not?
Yeah, that is early.
But I just kind of really glammed on to typewriting, as soon as it became a thing. And I think that honestly saved my wrists. Yeah. So I just don't do a lot of handwriting. And I've noticed if I do it for too long, it still bugs today. So,
or if you're like me, your brain moves at warp speed and your hand only moves like a turtle. And I can type like a beast. And so, typing matches how I think rather than, writing out longhand. I'm oh, this is never going to stop.
Yeah. But see, that's the beauty of the Google Docs. Is at least if I don't have the pen and paper, if I don't have the computer, well, I've got my stunt brain, my phone, I'm holding up my phone on me all the time. And that's even better. There's also apps like Todoist or little note-taking apps where you can voice to text your little thought and then leave it there.
I have a notepad on my, I downloaded the notepad app on my phone, and that's where I take, a good chunk of just if I'll see something that, gives me a little hint of inspiration, I'll write down what I see. And then when I come home, I'll write it down longhand, because for me, the notes, I have to move at a slower speed, because if not, then I'm not going to get down what I need to say. It's kind of like a contradiction. But, when it comes to the writing, then it has to be on keypad.
Well, for me, in the past, I've primarily used Microsoft Word, but I've actually been diving back into Scrivener. Have you tried that out?
I have. I do not really like Scrivener that much because it's a little harder for me to use. The one that I've been using is the one that was developed from, what is his name? It's Dave. I forget his last name. I just blanked. It's from Amazon, Kindle Spear. That Dave, was it Chanson? Forgive me for saying his name wrong, but it's fairly new, and I bought into it, and I love it. It did have some kinks and some, things that needed to be worked out, but so far for me, it's very easy to use. Now, I have other author friends that, they will not use anything other than Scrivener, and then, some that will use Vellum. It's just, having tried all of them, for me, the Atticus is what works the best.
Yeah. I've been using Scrivener for a few years now. Definitely love it. I love being able to, I love the corkboard aspect of it, because the way they do it is you can, instead of just having one file you write everything on, you can write files and scenes, and then it shows up as on a corkboard for 3x5 cards that you can kind of switch around during the editing process.
I have a friend who that's the main reason why she uses Scrivener, because it allows her to be a little bit more organized. And she's a very visual person, so that way if it's right there, she has a better chance of keeping things straight.
Yeah, so it's great being able to, do that. It's great being able to have like a split screen setup to where I can have the outline and the rough draft and work on both at the same time. I love having little spots available for like character sheets, and they provide character sheets as well. Like fill this out to know your character and all that stuff. So being able to have all that is definitely fun to have in this app. But I say, let's wrap up this episode and get to writing.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
I think we got to know kind of in general what we're all working on. So hopefully if anybody wants to follow along with us, as we're all on very different writing journeys, by the way, like I think that's really kind of neat. So we invite you to join along. And I would even say if anybody wants to come on with us, hit us up. I mean, as long as we don't have anything crazy, like 5 or 8 people or something like that, like it should be fine.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, worst case scenario, we'd have to record through Skype, and I think we can slum it for a while if we have to do that.
Slum it on Skype. Let's piss all over the free service we can use. Fuck you, Skype, but you're free. So
well, they're owned by
Right.
Microsoft, so I'm not that worried.
Well,
But
they don't give a shit about us, got it.
Yeah.
yeah, well, again, the purpose of this episode here was that, we kind of get used to each other. So the next time we meet up, I think will be the more appropriate time for us to kind of dive into our work. And
I agree.
Yeah, and also you'll have a lot more free time at that point to be able to have something. And again, too, for anybody that is listening to this, that is contemplating joining, when you do submit some writing to us, by no means are you ever going to be required to say anything on the air. In terms of the writing support here, the writing support you're going to get is among the people on the show. If you do want to talk about your writing on the air, it is fully encouraged, and we will do whatever we can to promote that work in any way possible once it does see the light of day. So, of course, Wendy, make sure that when we wrap this up, you text us with the links to your work so we can have it in the show description.
I will definitely do that.
Okay. So, and then, so I think we will wrap up this group of this meeting of the writers group here.
Good show, everyone.
Yay.
All right. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. And if you are interested, contact us. You can find us on social media. The links are in the show description. And every Wednesday and Saturday in this podcast space, we're going to have something to entertain your ear hole. So until that time comes again, we bid you adieu. Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy
on YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify,
or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Goodbye, darling.